Family gave me an ultimatum. Pay sister's $90,000 Mercedes or you're out. I chose out forever. My name is Marcus Hayes, and I've spent 31 years being invisible in a family that only sees dollar signs. It was 8:23 p.m. on a Thursday in March, and I was sitting in my 2017 Toyota Camry outside my parents' house in Stone Mountain, staring at the glow of the living room windows. The bass from someone's music system was vibrating through the neighborhood, a steady thump that matched my heartbeat. I'd been sitting there for 17 minutes, hands gripped on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. My car had 89,000 miles on it, a coffee stain on the passenger seat from 2 years ago that I never got around to cleaning, and a check engine light that came on every few months before mysteriously turning off again. It ran fine. It was paid for. It was practical. It was me. Hello friends, before I continue the story, please support the channel by becoming a subscriber and giving the video a like. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching right now. In the Hayes family, everyone had their role assigned at birth like some twisted play we never auditioned for. My younger sister, Diamond, was the star, beautiful, magnetic, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone else feel like extras. My father, Robert Hayes Sr., was the director, always orchestrating, always controlling the narrative from his leather recliner. My mother, Patricia, was the supporting actress who never questioned the script. My older brother, Robert Jr., was the enforcer, the one who made sure everyone stayed in line. And me? I was the stagehand, the one working behind the curtain, moving props, paying bills, making sure the show went on while no one remembered my name. Being the dependable one sounds honorable when you say it out loud, doesn't it? It sounds like people value you, like they appreciate your consistency and reliability. But in my family, being dependable just meant I was the emergency fund they could access without asking permission. I was the person they called when the lights were about to get cut off, when the rent was short, when someone needed bail money at 3 in the morning. I reached up and rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar tension headache creeping up from the base of my skull. My doctor told me it was stress-related and suggested meditation, maybe some exercise. I didn't tell him that no amount of deep breathing could cure being related to Robert Hayes Sr. I stared at the house where I grew up, a modest brick ranch that Dad always acted like it was a mansion in Buckhead. The porch light was on, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. People gathering, voices raised in that particular cadence that meant family drama was brewing. I hated these family meetings. I hated the smell of the place, that combination of fried fish, my mother's too sweet perfume, and the specific staleness that comes from keeping windows closed and secrets buried. A memory hit me hard, sharp and unexpected. I was 19, fresh out of my first year at Georgia Tech on a full academic scholarship. I had just been accepted into an elite summer internship at Microsoft, all expenses paid, a golden ticket to my future. I came home with the acceptance letter, practically floating, ready to celebrate. Instead, I walked into chaos. Diamond, then 16, crying on the couch because her boyfriend had broken up with her via text. "Not now, Marcus," my mother had said, barely glancing at my letter. "Your sister's heart is broken. She needs us right now. We're taking her to get her nails done and buy her something nice to cheer her up." They spent 3 hours at the mall and dropped $400 they didn't have. I spent the evening eating leftover chicken alone in my room, staring at my acceptance letter taped to the wall. That was when I learned the rules that would govern the next decade of my life. Diamond's minor inconveniences were treated like national emergencies. My major achievements were background noise that interfered with her spotlight. I checked my phone. 8:24 p.m. A text from my mother lit up the screen. "Where you at? Everybody waiting on you." Not "drive safe" or "take your time." Just the reminder that my absence was an inconvenience to their schedule. I took a deep breath, tasting the stale air of my car's interior mixed with the scent of the pine air freshener hanging from my rearview mirror. This was it. I had to go inside. I grabbed my phone and my keys, opened the door, and stepped out into the humid Georgia night. I didn't know it yet, but I was walking toward a crossroads that would define the rest of my life. The front door of my parents' house was unlocked, like always, because Dad said locks were for people who didn't trust their neighbors. I walked in without knocking because knocking in your childhood home feels wrong, even when you haven't lived there in 8 years. The living room was packed wall to wall with people. Bodies crammed onto the worn sofa, folding chairs brought in from the garage, and relatives leaning against walls. Aunts, uncles, cousins I only saw at funerals and weddings. They were all there, staring at me like I was the main attraction at a show I didn't buy tickets for. "Marcus is here," someone announced, and the murmur of conversation died down to an expectant silence. My father sat in his usual spot, the brown recliner positioned at the head of the room like a throne. Robert Hayes Sr. was 62 years old, a big man with a bigger voice, retired from the post office but never retired from running people's lives. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he'd already made a decision and this whole gathering was just theater to make it look democratic. "Boy, you late," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Traffic?" I lied, slipping past my cousin Deontay to find a spot near the doorway where I could lean against the wall. My mother, Patricia, sat on the arm of Dad's recliner, wringing her hands in that nervous way she'd perfected over 4 decades of marriage. She was wearing her church dress, the navy blue one she wore when she wanted to look respectable and serious. My brother, Robert Jr., stood behind the recliner like a bodyguard, arms crossed, face set in that expression he learned from Dad. The look that said he was about to deliver bad news and didn't care how you felt about it. "Where's Diamond?" I asked, scanning the room. "She's upstairs," Mom said quietly, her voice trembling like she was on the verge of tears. "She's real upset, Marcus. Real upset." "Upset about what?" I thought, but I didn't ask because I already knew the answer would be something ridiculous. Dad cleared his throat, that rumbling sound he made when he wanted everyone's attention. The room went silent except for the hum of the old air conditioning unit struggling in the window. "Family," Dad said, his voice deep and commanding like he was preaching from a pulpit. "We got ourselves a situation." I stayed quiet, watching. Dad's situations were legendary in our family. They usually involved someone needing money, someone getting arrested, or someone making a decision that everyone else had to suffer through. "This is about your sister," he continued, finally looking up at me. His eyes locked onto mine with the intensity of a man who expected obedience, not discussion. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. Of course it was about Diamond. Everything was always about Diamond. "Diamond's in trouble," Dad said slowly, letting the words hang in the air for maximum dramatic effect. "Financial trouble." I almost laughed out loud. Diamond had been in financial trouble since she got her first credit card at 18. Financial trouble was her permanent address. "She needs help," Dad said. "And family helps family. That's what we do." He paused, and I could feel every pair of eyes in that room turning toward me like searchlights. "Marcus," Dad said, and the way he said my name, with that fake warmth that barely concealed the command underneath, made my skin crawl. "You doing real good at that computer job, ain't you? Senior software engineer now, making that good money." I kept my face neutral, but my heart was pounding. "I do all right," I said carefully, choosing my words like I was navigating a minefield. "No wife, no kids." Dad listed my life circumstances like he was reading off a grocery list. "No mortgage, living in that little apartment. You got savings, son." "I know you do. I have a budget," I wanted to say. "I have goals." But I stayed silent. "Diamond needs someone to take over her car payments," Dad said, cutting straight to the point like he was ripping off a Band-Aid. "Just temporarily, till she gets back on her feet." Back on her feet. I'd heard that phrase so many times it had lost all meaning. Diamond had been getting back on her feet for a decade. "How much are the payments?" I asked, needing to hear the insanity spoken out loud. Dad hesitated, which was the first sign that the number was going to be astronomical. $1,500 a month, he said. The room tilted slightly. $1,500 a month? For what? Dad gestured toward the ceiling, toward Diamond's room upstairs. "She got herself a Mercedes. A class. It's good for her image, for her business." "What business?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Diamond worked part-time at a salon, doing nails when she felt like it. "She's trying to build her brand." Mom interjected quickly, defensively. "She's an influencer, Marcus." She needs to look successful to attract clients and sponsors. An influencer. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to maintain my composure. Diamond had 3,000 followers on Instagram, mostly people from high school and thirsty dudes in her DMs. That wasn't a brand. That was a hobby with delusions of grandeur. How much is she behind? I asked because there was clearly more to this story. 3 months, Robert Jr. said from behind Dad's chair. They're about to repo it. So we're talking about $4,500 in back payments, plus the $1,500 a month going forward. I calculated out loud, my engineering brain automatically running the numbers. That's nearly 23 grand a year. Dad waved his hand like I was being dramatic. It ain't that much for someone making what you make, son. I've seen your tax returns when you helped me with mine. I know what that tech money looks like. The violation of that statement hit me like a slap. I had helped him file his taxes as a favor, and he'd used that information to calculate how much he could extract from me. This isn't about whether I can afford it, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. This is about whether it makes sense. Dad's expression hardened. What makes sense is family taking care of family. Sell the car, I said, looking directly at him. Trade it in. Get her something affordable. A Honda, a Hyundai, something with a payment under 300. I can't drive no Honda. Diamond's voice came shrieking from upstairs, and suddenly she appeared at the top of the stairs. My sister was 28 years old and beautiful in that high-maintenance way that required constant investment. Hair always done, nails always perfect, outfit always coordinated. She was wearing designer leggings and a crop top. Her face made up even though we were just having a family meeting at home. She came down the stairs like she was descending a grand staircase at a ball. One hand on the railing, her face a mask of betrayal and tears. You want me to drive a Honda? She said, her voice breaking. You want me to look poor? You want me to pay $23,000 a year so you can look rich? I shot back. The room gasped like I'd committed blasphemy. Enough! Dad stood up from his recliner, all 6 feet 2 inches of him. Marcus, this is simple. You take over the payments. We get the car caught up. Diamond keeps her vehicle and her reputation. You do this or what? I interrupted. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Dad took a step toward me, and I could see the vein in his temple starting to throb the way it did when he was about to explode. Or you're choosing to put yourself outside this family, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're choosing money over blood. Every person in that room was staring at me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them waiting to see if I would fall in line like I always did. My mother had tears streaming down her face. Marcus, baby, please, she whispered. Just do this one thing. Keep the peace. One thing. As if this was the first time, as if I hadn't been doing one thing for them my entire adult life. I looked at Diamond standing there on the stairs, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of entitlement and victimhood. I looked at my father, the man who had never once said he was proud of me, but who knew exactly how much I made and exactly how much he thought I owed. I looked at my mother, who was asking me to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. No, I said. The word came out clear and final, like a door slamming shut. What did you say? Dad asked, his eyes narrowing. I said no. I'm not paying for Diamond's Mercedes. I'm not paying for her lifestyle. I'm not paying for her image. She's an adult. This is her mess. The explosion I expected didn't come. Instead, something worse happened. Dad smiled. Boy, he said softly. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your sister, you're done. You hear me? Done. You won't be welcome at Thanksgiving, Christmas. Nothing. You won't be in my will, not that you care about that. But more than that, he looked around the room. Anybody in this family talks to Marcus after he leaves, they're out too. I forbid it. My mother let out a sob. Robert, please. I mean it, Patricia, Dad said, cutting her off. He wants to be selfish. He can be selfish by himself. I looked around the room one more time. Not a single person spoke up for me. Not one. They were all relieved it wasn't them. Relieved they weren't the ones being sacrificed on the altar of Diamond's ego and Dad's control. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. If the price of admission to this family is financial exploitation, then I'm out. I turned and walked toward the door. Marcus, my mother screamed. Marcus, don't do this. Come back. I didn't turn around. I opened the door, stepped out into the thick Georgia night, and walked to my car. Behind me, I could hear Diamond crying, Dad yelling, the chaos erupting in that living room. I got into my Camry, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. As I drove away, I waited for the relief to hit me, that cinematic moment where the weight lifts and you feel free. It didn't come. Instead, about 3 miles from the house, I had to pull into a CVS parking lot because my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't keep the car straight. I opened the door and threw up in the parking lot, my body purging 31 years of conditioning, of being told that my value was measured in what I could provide. I sat there for a long time, breathing in the smell of asphalt and car exhaust, waiting for my heart to stop trying to beat its way out of my chest. When I finally got back on the road, the silence in the car was deafening. No radio, no podcast, just the sound of my own breathing and the hum of tires on pavement. I made it back to my apartment in Decatur around 10:30 p.m. It was a modest one-bedroom in an older building, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The rent was reasonable, the neighbors were quiet, and I'd painted the walls myself a color the paint store called tranquil blue. I walked inside, locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and put the chain on. Then I dragged a chair from the kitchen and wedged it under the doorknob. I felt like I was barricading myself in a bunker. I grabbed my mouth guard from the bathroom, the one my dentist made me get because I was grinding my teeth to dust in my sleep. He told me it was stress-related, suggested I try therapy or meditation. I never told him that the source of my stress was a family who saw me as an ATM with a pulse. I sat on my couch in the dark, staring at my phone on the coffee table. It sat there like a bomb with a timer counting down, and right on schedule it started buzzing. Mom, Dad, Robert Jr. Diamond, Aunt Carolyn, Mom again. I didn't touch it, couldn't. If I answered, I would hear the guilt, the crying, the manipulation. I would hear my mother's voice telling me I was tearing the family apart, that I was breaking her heart, that I was being selfish and cruel. I went into my bedroom, put in my earbuds, and played brown noise at maximum volume until I fell into a restless sleep filled with dreams of drowning. The next morning at 6:47 a.m., I heard it, pounding on my door, aggressive and insistent. I crept to the peephole, my heart racing. It was Robert Jr., looking rough, like he hadn't slept, still wearing the same clothes from last night. Marcus, he shouted through the door. Marcus, I know you in there. Your car is outside, man. Open up. I pressed my back against the door, willing him to leave. Go away, Robert. Just 5 minutes, bro. 5 minutes. Dad is willing to negotiate. He didn't mean all that stuff about cutting you off. Negotiate. Like this was a business deal, like my dignity was something we could haggle over. I'm not opening the door, I said through the wood. Come on, man. Mom is sick over this. She didn't sleep all night. Her blood pressure is through the roof. You gonna put her in the hospital over some pride? There it was, the weaponization of Mom's health, the guilt bomb they always deployed when logic failed. Tell her to take her medication, I said, and I hated how cold it sounded, but I had to be cold. If I showed any warmth, they would use it as a foothold to climb back into my life and resume the extraction. You really gonna do this? Robert Jr. said, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. You really gonna choose money over family? I already made my choice, I said. You're the ones who made it about money in the first place. I heard him kick the door in frustration, then footsteps retreating down the hallway. I watched through the peephole as he got into his car and drove away, his taillights disappearing around the corner. I slid down to the floor and sat there with my back against the door for a long time, wondering if I just made the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision I'd ever make. By Saturday, the sadness had crystallized into something sharper and more clarifying. Anger. When I got angry, I didn't yell or break things. I analyzed, I calculated, I built spreadsheets. I opened my laptop at my small kitchen table and created a new Excel file. I titled it, The The cost of being a good son. I went back through 7 years of bank statements, Venmo transactions, Zelle transfers, and credit card bills. I wanted to see the damage in black and white, wanted to quantify exactly what being the dependable one had cost me in actual dollars. Line item 1. Dad's truck repair, 2019, $1,200 because family helps family, and he couldn't get to his part-time security job without it. Line item 2. Diamond's rent, December 2020, $950 because she'd spent her rent money on a Cancun trip with her friends. Line item 3. Robert Jr.'s court fees, $2,300 from a DUI that Dad said would ruin his future if it wasn't handled immediately. Line item 4. Mom's dental work, $3,400 because Dad said they were a little short that month. They were always a little short. Line item 5. Diamond's credit card payment, $1,600 to keep her from defaulting and ruining her credit. The list went on, an endless scroll of crisis and catastrophe that somehow always required my immediate financial intervention. Family vacation rental in Florida that I funded because it would mean so much to Mom, $2,800. Diamond's car insurance when she couldn't pay and was about to lose her license, $1,400. Dad's business loan that was never paid back, $5,000. I kept typing, my fingers flying across the keys, each entry a small wound that had never properly healed. When I finally entered the formula at the bottom and hit enter, the number appeared in bold, $68,750. $68,750. That was a down payment on a house. That was 2 brand new cars. That was my master's degree paid in full. That was my freedom, converted into currency and handed over year after year while they called it love. My phone lit up again. The flying monkeys had been deployed. A text from Aunt Carolyn. After everything your daddy did for you, putting a roof over your head, feeding you, and this is how you repay him? You ought to be ashamed. That man is heartbroken. A text from my cousin Deontay, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 years. Yo, that's cold what you did to Diamond. She's really struggling, man. You make all that tech money and can't help your own sister? That's messed up. Then a text from my cousin Jasmine, Robert Jr.'s younger sister. Marcus? You okay? That meeting was insane. I wanted to say something, but I froze. I'm sorry. I stared at Jasmine's message for a long time. Was she genuine? Or was she a scout sent to test my defenses? Jasmine, I get it if you don't trust me. But for real, Uncle Robert was way out of line. $1,500 a month? For Diamond's car? That's crazy. I typed slowly. Thanks, Jazz. I appreciate you saying that. Jasmine, stay strong, cousin. Don't let them guilt you. You've been carrying this family on your back for too long. I screenshot the spreadsheet, all $68,750 worth of documented generosity. I didn't send it to anyone in my family. They wouldn't care, wouldn't even read it. To them, my money had always been their money, held in trust until they needed it. But for me, it was evidence. I wasn't abandoning them. I had already paid my dues 10 times over, had already given more than anyone had a right to ask. The first 2 weeks were brutal, like withdrawing from a drug I didn't know I was addicted to, the drug of being needed, of being the solution, of being essential. Every time my phone buzzed, my body flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. I couldn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. I deep cleaned my apartment twice, organized my closet by color, and checked my bank account obsessively, staring at the money that used to flow out like water from a broken pipe, but was now staying put, accumulating, growing. On a Wednesday evening, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw someone I didn't expect. Trevor. Trevor was my best friend from college, my roommate for 3 years at Georgia Tech, the guy who'd helped me move into this apartment and who'd listened to me complain about my family for a decade. He was a mechanical engineer, worked for Delta, and had exactly zero tolerance for bullshit. He was holding a bag from our favorite Caribbean spot and a 6-pack of Sweetwater IPA. I know you're in there, Marcus, he called through the door. Jasmine told me what happened. Open up, man. I opened the door. Trevor took one look at me. Unshaven, wearing the same Atlanta United shirt I'd been wearing for 2 days, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and just walked in without a word. He set the food on my kitchen counter, grabbed 2 plates from my cabinet like he owned the place, and started dishing out jerk chicken and rice and peas. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and then Trevor said, "So, you finally did it." "I finally did what?" "Cut them off. Jasmine said your pops gave you an ultimatum over Diamond's Mercedes and you walked." I felt the familiar shame rising in my chest, hot and suffocating. "Yeah. I walked." "Good," Trevor said, taking a pull from his beer. "About damn time." I looked at him, startled. "You think I did the right thing?" "Marcus, I've been watching your family bleed you dry since sophomore year. You remember when you had to drop that summer study abroad program because your dad needed money for his truck?" I remembered. I'd been accepted to a prestigious engineering program in Germany, all expenses paid except the flight. I'd saved up the $1,200 for the ticket, and then Dad's truck broke down 3 days before I was supposed to leave. "You're not using that money for the flight," I said, and it wasn't a question. "You gave it to him," Trevor confirmed. "And you stayed in Atlanta that summer working at Home Depot while Diamond posted pictures from Miami on Instagram." The memory hit me like a physical blow because I'd buried it, convinced myself it was fine, that I was being responsible, that family came first. "How much have you given them?" Trevor asked gently. I pulled up the spreadsheet on my phone and handed it to him. He scrolled through it, his expression darkening with every swipe. When he got to the total, he set the phone down and looked at me with something like grief in his eyes. "Marcus, man, this is..." He shook his head. "Nearly 70 grand. This is financial abuse," Trevor said quietly. "You know that, right? This isn't family helping family. This is exploitation." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. "They said if I didn't pay for Diamond's car, I'm dead to them." "Then they did you a favor," Trevor said firmly. "They cut off the part of you they could use and left you with the part that's actually you." My phone buzzed on the table. Mom calling for the 14th time that day. Trevor picked it up. "You want me to block these numbers for you?" I hesitated. That feels so final. "Marcus, you just saved yourself 18 grand a year by not paying for that car. You think that's the last thing they're gonna ask you for?" He was right. If I gave in on this, there would be something else next month, and the month after that, an endless parade of emergencies and crises that somehow always required my bank account to solve. Trevor went through my phone systematically. Dad blocked. Mom blocked. Robert Jr. blocked. Diamond blocked. Aunt Carolyn blocked. He left Jasmine unblocked and handed the phone back to me. "Now it's quiet," he said. "Listen to that." I listened. The silence was unsettling and peaceful all at once, like the moment after a storm passes and you can finally hear yourself think. "You're not a bad person," Trevor said, meeting my eyes. "You're just done being a good victim." We sat there on my couch, eating Caribbean food and drinking beer, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than guilt. I felt relief. 3 weeks passed. The blocked numbers stayed blocked, and the silence was eerie, like the eye of a hurricane where you know the other side is coming but you don't know when. I went to work, wrote code, attended meetings, came home. I started running again, something I'd given up years ago because I was always too stressed and tired. I ran through my neighborhood in Decatur, past the old houses and the people walking their dogs, and I felt my body remembering what it was like to move without carrying a weight. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the other side of the hurricane hit. I was at my desk at work, debugging a piece of code for our new mobile app, when a text came through from Jasmine. "Marcus, call me. Emergency. It's about your dad." My blood turned to ice. I stepped outside into the parking lot and called her. "What happened?" I asked before she could even say hello. "Uncle Robert is in the hospital," Jasmine said, her voice shaking. "He had a heart attack last night. Aunt Patricia called my mom this morning." "It's bad, Marcus. They're saying you need to come." A heart attack. The guilt crashed over me like a wave, immediate and drowning. I did this. My refusal, my stubbornness, my selfishness. I put him in the hospital. "Which hospital?" I asked, already walking toward my car. "Grady Memorial." ICU, third floor. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I drove to the hospital like I was on autopilot, my mind spinning with terrible possibilities. What if he died? What if the last conversation I ever had with my father was me telling him no? What if I was the villain in this story after all? I parked in the garage and ran to the elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs. Third floor, ICU. The doors opened and I stepped out into that terrible hospital smell of antiseptic and fear. I was halfway to the nurse's station when I stopped. Something Trevor said echoed in my mind. They'll use anything to get you back in line. I turned around, walked back to the elevator and went down to the lobby. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone, calling the hospital's main number. Grady Memorial. How can I direct your call? Patient information, please. Robert Hayes Sr. One moment. I waited, my palms sweating. Yes, I have a Robert Hayes in the cardiac observation unit, room 342. Observation unit, not ICU. Is he critical? I asked. I'm sorry, sir. I can only confirm he's in stable condition. You'll need to speak with his care team for more information. Stable condition. Not dying. Not on his deathbed. I hung up and stood there in the lobby, people flowing around me. Visitors with flowers, doctors in scrubs, a kid crying in his mother's arms. I called Jasmine back. Jazz, they told me he's in observation, not ICU. They said stable condition. There was a long pause. That's what my mom told me. She said ICU. Can you call the hospital and confirm? I asked. Another pause. Hold on. 5 minutes later, she called back. Marcus, I'm so sorry. You're right. He's in observation. My mom. She might have exaggerated because she was scared, or she was told to exaggerate, I said quietly. To get me here. I don't know, Jasmine said, and she sounded genuinely upset. I wouldn't put it past them, but I don't know for sure. I sat down on a bench in the lobby. If I went upstairs, I knew exactly what would happen. Dad would be sitting up in bed looking frail, Mom would be crying, and within 30 minutes someone would mention Diamond's car payments or some medical bill I needed to help with. This was the trap, and I had almost walked right into it. I'm not going up, I told Jasmine. I understand, she said softly. Take care of yourself, Marcus. I left the hospital without seeing my father. I got in my car, drove back to work, and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes trying to stop shaking. That night, I had nightmares. My father's voice calling me ungrateful, my mother weeping, Diamond screaming that I'd ruined her life. I woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, and I couldn't fall back asleep. But I didn't unblock their numbers. I didn't go back to the hospital. I held the line. A week later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. It was pale yellow, the handwriting shaky but familiar. My grandmother, Big Mama, my father's mother. Big Mama was 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in my family who'd ever told my father he was wrong about anything. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dear Marcus, I am writing to you from my kitchen table while your Aunt Lorraine helps me with the spelling of some words. My eyes aren't what they used to be. I heard what happened at the family meeting. Your father called me very upset, saying you abandoned the family. Then I called Jasmine, and she told me the truth. Marcus, I want you to know something. You are not wrong. Your father is a good man in many ways, but he has always confused control with love. He thinks if he can make you do what he wants, it means you respect him. But real respect isn't forced. It's earned. I know they're telling you that you're selfish and cruel. I know your mother is crying and your father is angry. But baby, I've watched you for 31 years. You put yourself through college. You send me money every Christmas even though I never asked. You helped your brother, your sister, your parents over and over, and they never once said thank you. They just held out their hands again. You can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. You can't save people who are drowning on purpose just to make you jump in the water. Stay away, baby. Build your life. Find your peace. I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. With love, Big Mama. P.S. I put $100 in this envelope. Don't you dare put it in savings. Buy yourself something that makes you smile. I pulled out the 5 crisp $20 bills tucked into the letter and I broke down crying. Not the desperate, panicked crying of before, but the kind of crying that comes when someone finally sees you, really sees you, and tells you that you're not crazy. The matriarch, the woman who raised my father and knew him better than anyone, had given me permission to save myself. I took that $100 and I didn't put it in savings. I went to the bookstore and bought a stack of science fiction novels I'd been wanting to read for years but always felt too guilty to spend money on. I sat in the bookstore cafe and read for 3 hours, drinking overpriced coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: lightness. 6 months passed. Without the family tax, something remarkable happened to my financial life. The $1,500 I wasn't paying for Diamond's car, plus the random hundreds and thousands I wasn't sending home for various crises, stayed in my account. My savings, which had hovered around $35,000 for years, suddenly climbed. By September, I had $71,000 sitting in my high-yield savings account, earning interest, growing like a plant I'd finally stopped cutting back. I got promoted at work, senior software engineer to lead engineer, with a salary bump that made my eyes water when I saw the offer letter. Turns out, when you're not spending your workdays managing family drama and your nights grinding your teeth to dust, you perform better at your job. I started looking at houses, not in Stone Mountain where I'd grown up, not anywhere near my family. I looked east toward Lithonia, toward neighborhoods with trees and quiet streets and people who didn't know my last name. I found it on a Saturday in late September. A small brick ranch house built in the 1960s with good bones and a backyard that backed up to a wooded area. It wasn't fancy, didn't have marble countertops or a 3-car garage, but it had something better. Big windows that let in light, and in the backyard, there was a peach tree heavy with fruit. I put in an offer. It was accepted. I qualified for the mortgage on my own. No cosigners, no family connections, just me, my credit score, and my income. When I got the keys 3 weeks later, I drove there alone. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The air smelled like paint and possibility. I didn't have furniture yet, so I sat on the floor of what would be my living room. I closed my eyes and listened. No yelling, no demands, no guilt. Just the sound of wind in the trees outside and the distant call of a bird I couldn't identify. I laughed out loud, and the sound bounced off the empty walls and came back to me. I was 32 years old, and for the first time in my life I was home. The housewarming party was small and perfect. Trevor came, brought his girlfriend and a drill set as a gift. Jasmine came with her husband and a beautiful painting for my living room. I invited 3 friends from work, good people who knew me as Marcus the engineer, not Marcus the family ATM. And on a whim, I'd sent Big Mama a letter with my new address, telling her she didn't have to come but that I wanted her to know where I was. At 2 p.m., a car pulled up and Big Mama got out, moving slowly with her cane, wearing her Sunday best despite it being a Saturday. I ran down the driveway like I was 10 years old. "Big Mama, you came. Your cousin Lorraine drove me," she said, gesturing to the car where Aunt Lorraine waved. "I told your father I was going to the beauty shop. He doesn't need to know my business." She looked at the house, looked at the yard, looked at me. "Good," she said simply. "This is good, baby." We ate pizza on paper plates because I hadn't bought dishes yet. We drank sweet tea and beer, and Trevor fixed a loose cabinet door in the kitchen while Jasmine told me the latest family gossip. Diamond had sold the Mercedes for a loss and bought a used Nissan Altima, was working full-time at a call center now because she had to. Robert Jr. had moved back in with Mom and Dad after his lease was up. Dad refused to say my name. I was just your brother when Mom talked about me. "How's Mom?" I asked, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. I did want to know. "She's sad," Jasmine said honestly. "But she's okay. She asks about you. And Dad. Still angry, but that's his choice." Later, Trevor found me on the back porch, looking out at the peach tree. "Nice place, homeowner," he said, handing me a beer. "Needs some work, but it's got good bones." "Plenty of work," I agreed. "But I've got time." "We've got time," he corrected. "I'm pretty handy with drywall if you need help." The word settled into my chest, warm and solid. "Yeah, we do." A year and 2 months had passed since the family meeting. It was now late April, and I was at the farmer's market in Decatur, comparing prices on tomatoes and thinking about what to plant in my backyard garden. Marcus! I froze. I knew that voice. I turned around slowly. Diamond stood there, but she looked different. Her hair was natural, pulled back in a simple ponytail, no extensions. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt from the call center she worked at, no designer labels. She was carrying reusable shopping bags, not a $3,000 purse. She looked older, but in a good way, she looked real. Diamond, I said carefully. Hey, hey, she said, and there was none of the usual performance in her voice. I saw you from across the market. Thought I'd say hi. We stood there in awkward silence, surrounded by people buying fresh vegetables and homemade soap. How are you? I asked finally. I'm okay, she said. Working, paying my bills, driving a 2016 Ultima that I actually own. She gave a small, self-deprecating smile. No car payments. That's good, I said, and I meant it. I hated you, she said suddenly, her voice dropping. When you left, when the Mercedes got repossessed, when I had to move out of my apartment and get a real job, I hated you so much. I know, I said. But you were right, she continued, and tears welled up in her eyes. If you had paid for that car, I would still be pretending, still be living a fake life, still be depending on everybody else to hold me up. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm still broke, Marcus. I'm still figuring it out. But I'm standing on my own feet now. And I have you to thank for that. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, Diamond whispered. For everything. For being a spoiled brat. For letting Mom and Dad treat you like a bank. For never saying thank you. I looked at my sister, the golden child who'd finally been forced to land and discovered she could actually walk. I'm sorry too, I said. For what? For leaving the way I did. For not trying to help you in a better way. No, she said firmly. You did help me. You just didn't help me the way I wanted. You helped me the way I needed. We stood there for another moment, and then Diamond shifted her shopping bags. I should go. I wanted to say that. If you ever want to get coffee or something, no pressure, but I'd like that. Maybe, I said honestly. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday. I understand, she said. Take care of yourself, Marcus. You too, Diamond. I watched her walk away through the crowd, getting into a silver Nissan that was practical and paid for. She drove away and I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it somewhere down the road. That evening, I sat on my back porch with Trevor, watching the sun set behind the trees. The peach tree was blooming, delicate pink flowers that would become fruit in a few months if I took care of it. Diamond showed up at the farmer's market today. I told him. Yeah? How'd that go? She apologized. Said I was right. Trevor raised his eyebrows. Character development. Didn't see that coming. Me neither, I admitted. You gonna let her back in? Trevor asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe eventually. On my terms. Good man, Trevor said. Boundaries are healthy. My phone buzzed. A text from Big Mama with a picture of her cat wearing a tiny hat. I smiled and sent back a heart emoji. I thought about the question that sometimes kept me awake at night, the question I knew people would ask if they knew the whole story. Was I too harsh? My father had a heart scare. My mother cried. Diamond lost her car and her lifestyle. Did I abandon them when they needed me most? I took a sip of my beer and looked at my house, my sanctuary, the space I'd built brick by brick and boundary by boundary. No, I didn't abandon them. I stopped participating in my own exploitation. They wanted me to pay $18,000 a year so my sister could drive a status symbol while working part-time. When I said no, they threatened to erase me from the family. I simply accepted their terms. Saying no wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. I finally found peace under my peach tree. My life isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. My parents still don't speak to me, and I don't know if they ever will. That hurts in a way I can't fully articulate. There's a Marcus-shaped hole in their lives and a parent-shaped hole in mine. But I don't miss the version of our relationship that was based on extraction and obligation. I have Trevor, who shows up with tools and pizza without being asked. I have Jasmine, who texts me memes and checks in on me. I have Big Mama, who calls me every Sunday just to hear my voice. I have a job I'm good at, a house I'm proud of, and a bank account that isn't being drained every month. And most importantly, I have myself, a version of myself that doesn't need to bankrupt his future to purchase temporary approval from people who confused love with leverage. Sometimes I wonder, if I had paid for that Mercedes, would they have ever respected me? Or would there just have been another crisis next month? Another demand? Another test of my loyalty disguised as family obligation? The answer, I think, is that it wouldn't have mattered. You can't buy respect from people who only see you as a resource. You can only waste your money trying. Thank you for watching all the way through. There's another story to your left screen. You'll enjoy it more than this one.